Go.
First thing you gotta do is put a little bit of edge on your drawing knife, and it's got a flat side and a side with an angle. So put the blade flat and give it a little bit of an angle. Oops.
Don't drop it,
And if you've
silly.
sharpened it before, use a soft grit, and if you haven't sharpened it in a long time, use a coarse grit. You can take off more if it comes like this, but it's up to you. Anyway, I'm putting a little bit of a angle on it, and then a steeper angle to make it tougher. And that's going to tend to roll the metal over. So on the flat side, on the back side, I'm going to go to completely flat with this thing. So just rub off the little bit of metal that rolled over. You assume it rolled over. Alright. So if you want to test how sharp it is, you put it on your nail, like an ash, not deep, and just drag it across your nail. And if it peels off the nail like that, then it's sharp enough to work. If you want to get razor sharp for moving through this stuff like butter, it takes more time. I forgot to cut the end off the handle. We'll do that in a little while. So put your blank in here, and remember you're going to be getting rid of the wood on the sides of the paddle more. So if you want to hold it someplace, holding it right here is a nice place to hold it, because you're going to be getting rid of the scar that you formed. And then laying it on your leg.
Not really, mine has a scar on it.
Laying it on your leg also helps. It gives you something to push against. And then you've got two ways to do this. You've got the flat side, which won't tend to dig in as far. Also, depending on which way that you're hitting against the grain, sometimes it digs in more than others, but this is the least amount of dig in. It's the self-righting ditch that it cuts.
And
but if you
obviously
flip it
you want
over,
to be kind of careful with it.
you flip it over to the side that's angled and you start digging, that'll continue to dig deep down into the wood, and sometimes it can dig down into the grain of the next layer, and it can shoot a split right down the middle of your handle. So it's best to work with the flat side toward the wood on these drawing knives, which you can get for about $10 at a antique sale.
Don't they have them at like Lowe's or something?
Yeah. So I'm going to come down to the line here.
Been good ones at
Right
both
now.
places.
You can try to keep it flat across here if you want. And you see where I've got these saw marks here? I'm not going to come up this way on those. I'm going to try to get rid of those saw marks by coming into them and not taking a chance on splitting them. And you have to be careful you don't dig down into the handle and end up making your handle too narrow here. So you can take the edges off the handle, the corners, but don't take the width off the handle. You've got only so much width to work with. And most of the strength in this handle, since it's rectangular shaped, is going to be in its width. You can't narrow down the width too much. These are usually designs made for 2x10 or a 2x4 cut down, 2x6. Any of those that are that thick will give you plenty of wood, and you'll have a round handle. This one you're going to have a square handle. And sometimes you have to dig and curl this thing as you're getting close to the edge to keep it from digging in. Alright, so that's that curve, that's that cut that we made earlier, and it's mostly completely gone now. See how it's gone? We got to do the same thing on that side, and then this line right here, we're going to leave this maximum width. We follow that line. We'll do the other part, the part where we make it narrow, more blade-like. I'm going to do that later, but you can go ahead and take some off if you got a good angle.
How do you know what a good angle is?
If it cuts really smoothly like that, for that spot right there, that's a good spot for that angle. But if you come on down here, I'm not cutting with the grain so much as I'm cutting across the grain, and it's not cutting very well right now, so I'm going to have to get a
So you want to cut with it, not across
different
it?
direction. It usually works best to cut with it. Cutting across it would be like cutting this way, and for that you need like a saw. This thing has a cutting action and not a sawing action. So sometimes you can turn that thing up, reverse it, and work on like this handle over here. Again, you got to scallop it out, almost scoop it out, so you don't cut too far down and narrow your handle. The main thing is to get that kerf out of there. Because you can't leave that cut in there. That cut right there, if we let it go, would continue to split and that paddle part would fall off. Alright, so we got this started. So we're not going to take any of the width off the blade, and that's pretty much on the line, right? It's cut on the line. So what we could do is turn the blade at an angle, try to make it more blade-like now. You got to check this thing, make sure you're not using the wrong side, the flat side.
You don't want to razor sharp.
So if that gives you a problem, put it closer to you. Just don't make the mistake of smoothing this down early in the process, because you're going to go ahead later with these scars that you put in it and smooth all this down, and that'll take away your scars. So leave this rough part here to the last. Right, you can lay it on your leg, so you got something to push on. And this is just if you're using a vise, because if you use a drawing horse, then it'll hold it firmly in place. And I'm assuming you're just going to stick a vise with a piece of wood or something. So I'm going to take this profile. It helps if you could do this, if you got a piece of, if you got a pencil, go ahead and mark the middle. So if you go ahead and make a mark on the middle, right straight down the middle, the wood, and get something that'll last. I'm about there right now. Give yourself a reference point, and that way when you're shaving this down, you don't go past it and make the edge of the paddle feathered. If you start seeing big clumps fall off like I just did, flip it around and go the other direction. And see how it's cutting more controlled now? It's peeling stuff off as opposed to wedging stuff off. You just flip it around and go the other direction. You're going this way against the grain as opposed to this way. It doesn't like it that way, so you just flip it around and go the other direction. But in this part right here where it's straight, it does like having it this way. And it doesn't like it that way. So I think the difference is this is an angled piece of wood, and it's almost like you're coming across the end grain. This is a piece of wood where you're running right with the grain, and it's not liking it that way. So I'd have to turn around and go this way, and it should peel nicely like that to control that. So I'm trying to get rid of that little bit right there. And I can't go through this like I did and try to scalp it, because every time I do I'm going to gouge that out. I can, however, turn it over and try to use that other feature. The blade has two angles, and then try to scalp it out without putting that in so much danger.
What are you doing that for?
Sometimes you can slide the blade when you're trying to take out a bunch of wood at once. And it's getting kind of dull. Instead of keep trying to push through it, you can come across the grain and slice it out with more control. That's a good start on that. We got both shoulders somewhat under control, so that we don't have to worry about that split continuing. You have to look sometimes and look for splits, like there might be one in the board right here. And if that ever happens, you go ahead and split it off and glue it and clamp it back together. It'll be stronger glued than it was originally.
Except sometimes the glue does come apart if you use it too soon.
Yeah, true. So that's halfway on this side. Alright, so you see it's kind of a much thinner edge now. It's still pretty thick. See my fingers how far apart they are? Still pretty thick right there. But in here, it's down to about 1/4 inch. And you can, that last part you can use a pocket knife, or you can use a sanding tool.
And not cut towards yourself?
Get there. Just be sure if it starts to dig in too far, to turn your blade around and cut the other direction until you get rid of that big gap you just made. Alright, so that's got started, and this will be the next stage. We'll use a file. We're going to go inside. Ready, Jen?
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so enough of that.